All right, welcome everyone. Today, we're going to dive into a concept that is, and I mean this, absolutely fundamental to making smart, profitable business decisions. It's called marginal analysis. And really, it sits right at that perfect intersection of calculus and real-world corporate strategy. For any of you who want to be managers someday, well, mastering this is just non-negotiable.
Okay, so let's get right into the thick of it with a question. I want you to imagine you're a plant manager for a minute. The assembly line has just hit its daily target, 1,000 units, let's say, done for the day. But then you get a call. It's your top salesperson, and they've got an urgent order. They need just one more. Or, maybe you just look over and see there's just enough material and labor time left to make one extra product. What do? You have to make the call. Should you produce unit 1001? Now, it seems like a tiny decision, right? But this single choice can either add to your bottom line or it could actually take away from it. Answering this one very specific question is exactly what we're here to learn how to do today.
The entire economic framework for answering that question is really captured in this powerful phrase, thinking at the margin. You'll hear economists and successful business leaders use this term all the time. Now, this requires a pretty critical shift in your perspective. See, as managers, it's so easy to get caught up in the big picture, isn't it? Total output, total revenue, average costs. But thinking at the margin forces us to stop, to completely ignore that big picture for a moment, and instead zoom in with almost microscopic precision on the financial impact of the next single action.
So how do we actually do this? How do we quantify this whole idea of thinking at the margin? Well, it requires us to isolate and measure two very specific and kind of opposing economic forces that are going to guide our decision. These are the two key variables for our entire analysis: marginal revenue and marginal cost.
Let's kick things off with the first one, marginal revenue, or as you'll often see it, MR. The formal definition right from our textbook is incredibly precise, and every single word here matters. It is the additional revenue you gain from producing and selling one more unit of a good. The key words that you absolutely have to lock into your brain are additional and one more. We are not talking about the average price of your product or the average revenue per unit. No, we are isolating the specific revenue generated by that single next item. Let me put this in the most direct terms possible, because I really want this concept to be crystal clear. Let's say you sell 100 laptops and your total revenue is $100,000. Then you manage to sell that 101st laptop, and your total revenue climbs to $100,800. So what's your marginal revenue? It's precisely $800. It's that extra cash that specific incremental sale brought into the business. That's it.
Okay, now for the other side of the coin, marginal cost, or MC. And you'll notice the definition runs perfectly parallel to marginal revenue. It is the additional cost incurred from producing that one more unit. Once again, your focus has to be on that word additional. This isn't your average cost of production over the whole day. It's the specific out-of-pocket expense that was required to create that one single extra item and get it ready for sale. So let's stick with our laptop example. If making 100 laptops cost your company a total of, say, $60,000 in materials, labor, electricity, all of it, and producing 101 laptops raises that total cost to $60,450, well, then your marginal cost for that 101st unit is $450. It's the specific cost of the processor, the screen, the assembly time, and the bit of power used for that one single additional machine. Okay, so the concepts of MR and MC, they're pretty intuitive when we're looking backward at what already happened. But in a real business, you can't just measure them after the fact. You need to be able to forecast them. So how do we predict these values with any kind of accuracy? Well, this is where the mathematics part of our course becomes absolutely essential. This is the calculus connection. Now this is the operational key to the whole thing. This phrase here is taken right from our source material. Marginal revenue and marginal cost are mathematically represented by the first derivatives of the total revenue and total cost functions. Now, for those of you with a strong calculus background, a little light bulb should be going off right now. And for those of you for whom calculus feels, well, a little bit distant, don't you worry, we're about to demystify this powerful idea.
Let's break this down. A function, like your total cost function, it's just a curve on a graph, right? It shows how your costs change as production goes up. A derivative is this really elegant tool from calculus that lets us measure the slope, or, the steepness, of that curve at any single specific point. By finding that slope, we find the instantaneous rate of change. So when we take the derivative of the total cost function, we're essentially creating a whole new function, the marginal cost function, that tells us the precise cost of the very next unit at any level of production. It's the tool that gives us that microscopic precision we keep talking about.
All right, so now we have the economic concepts, and we have the mathematical tool to calculate them. Let's put it all together. How do we synthesize all of this to make a concrete go or no-go decision on the factory floor? Well, it all comes down to a remarkably simple and incredibly powerful decision rule.
And here it is, this table. This is your guide. This is the entire decision-making framework in just 3 lines. Let's walk through it. First, if your marginal revenue is greater than your marginal cost, the decision is an unequivocal produce. Why? It's simple. The money you'll get from selling that next unit is more than the money you spent to make it. That unit is a profit generator. Second, if your marginal revenue is less than your marginal cost, you stop immediately. Producing that next unit would actually cost you more than you'd make from selling it. You would literally be losing money on that specific transaction. And that brings us to the crucial third line. What if they're exactly equal? If MR equals MC, you also stop. This is the summit. This is the exact point where you have maximized your profit. Every single unit you produced up to this point made you money, and any unit you produce beyond this point is going to lose you money. So picture this. My analyst, Johnson, comes to my desk. Boss, I need the numbers for unit 5001. So Johnson runs the models and comes back and says, okay, the marginal revenue is projected at $50 and the marginal cost is $35. So what's my call? It's instant. Green light, we produce it. Why? Because that's a clean $15 of pure profit on that single unit that we would have just left on the table if we hadn't done this analysis. Now, a word of warning. This is really important. One of the most common and frankly most costly mistakes that students and even junior managers make is confusing marginal cost with average cost. They'll look at their data and say, well, on average, our units cost us $40 to make. But using that average to decide on the next unit is a huge error. Your average cost includes all your fixed costs, your rent, your executive salaries, all of it spread out over thousands of units. It completely hides the true incremental cost of producing just one more. The decision to produce the next unit must always be based on marginal values. Remember. So let's wrap this all up into a repeatable 4-step process that you can actually take with you into your careers. 1. You work with your finance and operations teams to figure out the mathematical functions that model your total revenue and total cost. 2. You apply calculus. You calculate the first derivative of each of those functions to get your MR and MC functions. 3. You plug in your current production number to find the specific values of MR and MC right at that point. And 4. You apply that decision rule we just talked about and you make the call. Increase production or hold the line. It's a clear, data-driven path to a profitable decision. I just want to pause for a second and really emphasize why this entire lecture isn't just some abstract exercise in a university classroom. This is the core language of business optimization. Understanding and applying this process is what separates a manager who just oversees a department from a leader who systematically maximizes its profitability. This is how you translate a mathematical formula on a whiteboard into real, tangible dollars on a company's bottom line. And that really brings us full circle, right back to this concise summary from our source material. This whole process, this way of thinking, is a primary tool that businesses use every single day to make critical decisions, not just about production levels, which we've discussed at length, but also about pricing strategies, which, by the way, is a topic we'll explore in much greater detail in our next lecture. So, I'll leave you with a final thought to chew on before we meet again. Consider this classic business scenario. You're increasing production, and your marginal cost starts to creep up. Maybe you have to start paying workers overtime, or your suppliers are charging more for bulk materials. So, does a rising marginal cost automatically mean you should stop producing? Think carefully about that decision rule we just established. The answer: it isn't as simple as it might first appear, and it gets right to the very heart of strategic thinking at the margin. We'll dissect this next time. Class dismissed.